Okay, I wanted to first thank our sponsors for coming out, for helping us with this panel. One of the most important sponsors is the New Mexico Freedoms Alliance, a statewide grassroots coalition supporting freedom for New Mexicans in all domains of life, including health, employment, education, and personal sovereignty. NMFA informs people about pertinent issues and laws across the state. You can join their email list to stay up to date and receive quick and easy calls to action for getting involved. Website is nmfa.us. And Sarah Smith is here from the New Mexico Freedoms Alliance. She's a co-leader of the organization and is also vice chair of the Coalition for Conservatives in Action in Las Cruces. Sarah is also a homeschooling mother of 2 teens, a natural health care provider, and a former NASA aerospace engineer. So, Sarah?
Thank you all for being here. This is incredibly important. People are really trying to prevent others from understanding the issues that you guys are learning about tonight. So I'm really glad that you are all here. There are a lot of issues going on in New Mexico schools right now that are directly related to this. I organize a group of over 200 teachers across the state, and what is happening in the schools, the parents don't really understand. They don't really know that they really need to be proactive right now. So teachers are being trained right now to routinely ask students what pronouns they want to be addressed by in elementary school. The teachers are also being told that they need to not tell the parents if a child wants to be addressed by different pronouns or name. So that's a huge disconnect. The New Mexico School Board Association, when they train school boards around the state, they literally said, quote, "Parent rights end when you send your children to public school." So that is a really big problem. The students themselves are also being indoctrinated. For instance, here in Santa Fe at public charter school, New Mexico School for the Arts, 9th graders were taught a presentation from the New Mexico Department of Health about ungendering their language. And this presentation literally told them, if you use gendered language, you are discriminating. You shouldn't use words like boy, girl, mom, dad, brother, sister. They were telling kids they need to only use words like parent and sibling and nibbling, which is not a word. So this is happening in the schools. Over 100 schools in New Mexico also have rainbow libraries in the classroom. That means the teachers asked for them. And we don't have any idea which classrooms have that, but the GLSEN website proudly proclaims that there are these rainbow libraries in New Mexico schools, which provides books that are encouraging children to question their gender right in the classroom. So that is happening right now all across New Mexico. Last year in 2023, the New Mexico legislature signed into law a few really important laws that people need to know about. And I want to recognize Representative Harlan Vincent, who's here today. I really appreciate you being here. He is one of those who was standing against these laws. So the main law that people need to know about is HB 7, and this is the Gender Affirming and Reproductive Care Law. And what it says is that school teachers and school nurses have to facilitate access to transgender and abortion care with no age restrictions, no parental consent, and if they do not do so, they can be charged $5,000 civil penalty. Now, the bill, it's not that obvious because it's basically you're reading between the lines. They don't mention parental consent at all. They don't mention age at all, but that means those things aren't protected. So along with that, they also are rolling out school-based health centers across the state. We already have many dozens of these across the state, but that provides a direct access. So if a child is wanting to have transition, the school-based health center is right there, and they can already start doing that without telling the parents what's going on. So more parents need to know what's going on, and I'm really glad that all of these panelists are here to talk about it today. Thank you. Okay, so Yvette is going to come up right now, and Yvette has done a lot with helping to organize this event on our behalf, and it's much appreciated. I'm also just going to mention Denise real quick, because Denise has been awesome as well in bringing this event and helping to coordinate the whole thing for New Mexico. Denise is here from Roswell today. Okay, so Yvette Neri is a mother, grandmother, and longtime resident of New Mexico who is committed to safeguarding children and vulnerable adults from affirmation-only medical protocols and ideologies. She's a member of Gays Against Groomers, the New Mexico Freedoms Alliance, and Moms for Liberty.
Hi, I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists today. Soren Aldaco is an undergraduate researcher and humanities honors student at the University of Texas in Austin. Soren's interests revolve around the question of how we define normal and how we use that definition to understand ourselves and relate to other people, particularly in the context of the internet. This approach is informed by Soren's background in neurodiversity and disability reform, experience with collaborative education, and study of developmental psychology, sociology, anthropology, and more. Outside of the classroom, Soren is an active bridge builder and proud advocate for the development of a more holistic, mindfulness-based approach to sex-related distress and cultural nonconformity. Soren regularly participates in nonpartisan roundtable discussions on the pressing social and economic issues with organizations like Bridge USA, and Soren has extensively spoken to individuals, groups, and communities across the political spectrum about her experience with transition, detransition, and mental well-being. Nicolas Blooms. Yeah. Nicolas Blooms is a detransitioner, gender shaman, and soul artist. He is full of fruity passion to create ways for people to spark the deeper magical wisdom within their hearts. While life coaching detransitioners and gender-confused individuals, he also co-creates a children's book series, You Can't Steal My Smile, with his friend Kim O, a relational soul coach to empower children to root their inner resilience. Witness his liberating journey to self-love and remembering his soul by soaking in his graphic novel, Trans to Detrans, A Soul Solution. It's totally possible to heal gender dysphoria and any other mental dis-ease. Chloe Cole, a poised and articulate 20-year-old young woman, passionately advocates against the practice of transitioning minors. Driven by a noble mission to safeguard children from potentially harmful ideologies and medical interventions, Chloe draws from her personal experiences to shed light on the distressing consequences of gender-affirming care for adolescents. Having embarked on her own transition journey at the tender age of 12, only to subsequently detransition at 16, Chloe speaks with firsthand authority on the deeply traumatic effects experienced by minors undergoing such treatments. Kevin Jones is 34 from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and has accidentally followed the footsteps of both his great-grandfathers from his father's side. Both gained an undergraduate and master's performance diploma in music and then continued on to do something else completely different. Unfortunately for Kevin, while he pursued his undergraduate master's and almost completing a doctorate, he also got caught up in the gender cult starting in his early 20s, resulting in consenting to a vaginoplasty in the middle of drug addiction, breast implants, and was faced with manic depression and constant suicide attempts. Yet somehow came out of all of that and was still dedicated to healing. Embracing life with such love, light, and joy he can possibly internalize to share with his friends, family, and loved ones. It's been a year since he detransitioned and is now an electrician, practices jujitsu, started a support group for detransitioners and parents called Detrans Circle, and is an amazing uncle to his incredible 5 nieces and nephews. Airiel Salvatore. From a broken home to high school dropout to homelessness, my early life was fraught with challenges. As a young adult under state care, I grappled with the belief that I was born in the wrong body, a conviction that lasted 2 decades. The turning point came when I examined how childhood abuse shaped me. Freed from distortion, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and authenticity. Now I'm committed to learning about human nature and seeking truth no matter how uncomfortable. My mission is to flourish by overcoming parasitic thinking. I strive for personal growth through embracing our capacity for resilience, thinking from first principles, understanding the human experience. My goal is to use my insights to help others navigate their journeys of self-discovery and healing. Laura Becker is a detransitioner advocate, speaker, and author of upcoming memoir, Quirky Not Queer, Surviving the Trans Cult. Laura had a history of childhood trauma, autism, and suicide ideation when she was approved for transition at 19. She injected testosterone for 7 months and had her breasts removed at 20, only to detransition at 22. Since 2021, Laura has been an outspoken advocate for the detransitioner, fighting the lies of gender ideology and raising awareness about complex trauma. Find Laura's anti-woke merchandise and speaking engagements on funkpsyche.com and follow her memoir updates on social media. Our moderator tonight is Martha Schultz. She is co-founder and attorney for Partners for Ethical Care and leads its transition justice program.
So quickly, I also wanted to thank 2 detransitioners who help us on a daily or weekly basis. Kat Cattinson takes care of all the social media for Transition Justice and makes incredible videos. So we have a lot of reach because of what she does. Also, Camille Kiefel helps us keep track of our litigation, and so those 2 contribute a whole lot, as do so many other detransitioners who are not here tonight, and these guys, of course. So we'll start with them. So I wanted us to ask, let's see, who should I ask this question? So many people have been harmed by gender medicine, but not everyone has grown through that experience. That's why we're listening to you guys tonight. In a few sentences, maybe each of you could update us on what's going on, starting with Soren. Oh, I should have started with you.
We'll just go down the line. That's okay. So yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I feel like I live a pretty average life. I'm in Texas and Austin, about as average as one can be in the weirdest city in America. But I am a 5th year at the University of Texas, and I'm writing my thesis this year actually on how the internet is influencing identity formation, specifically in regards to the acquisition and resolution of cross-sex identities, which I'm sure you'll hear plenty about tonight, right? But I'm kind of, interested in, for those of us for whom this identity was temporary, when did we get exposed to the internet? What were our salient experiences? Did the internet play a role in our detransition? Just trying to do some tracking because frankly, and I'm sure some of you know this, but maybe not all, there isn't a lot of information out there on transition, let alone detransition. Just really, really nothing. It's the Wild West. So that's what I'm up to right now. I also have 2 cats. I love them. I bet they're missing me a lot right now. But yeah, I don't really know what the future holds. I might apply to grad school. I just really like learning, and so that's where I'm going to stay right now. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I just recently moved to Phoenix, Arizona. I originally lived in Illinois, and that was a chaotic place that I had to move away from because there was so much trauma. And my family dynamic was getting awful, so moving to Phoenix has been such a liberating experience and healing experience because the house I live with 7 papillons, and they're so cute and yapping all day long, and there's just so much love all day long. And if I go outside, I hear the birds chirping because there's like 50 birds in the aviary, and it's such a wonderful zoo to live in. While I'm surrounded by love, I do coaching sessions with detransitioners and men with autogynephilia just to give them some direction, some truth and love, and witnessing them, because a lot of people don't know themselves. A lot of people are completely lost in this gender confusion and identity, and especially with people like us having a framework through Enneagram, through personality tests like the Myers-Briggs, having that sort of structure to realize, oh, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and realizing when are my weaknesses showing up. And when those weaknesses show up, I can show up in my strength to support those weaknesses. And that's kind of what I do to guide and give detransitioners a framework of who they are and starting to step into their authenticity, since authenticity is so muddy and messy in today's day age with what trans has become. So that's what I'm doing in a nutshell: surrounded by love, giving love, and supporting people.
So, as some of you may know, I've been pretty busy for the past about like 2 to 3 years of my life. Since I was 17, I've been speaking up about my experience going through transitioning and back while I was still a kid. And since I started speaking out, I started small on X when it was still called Twitter, when it was still the Bird app. And I didn't really expect it to take off the way that it did. And I've since spoken on pieces of legislation, helping to get legislation passed to protect other children from going through what we all have gone through. And I've also spoken to many communities all across the US and now abroad. I actually went to Australia and New Zealand this summer, which was a total blast, but unfortunate timing considering I caught the flu. It was so the seasons are reversed. It was down in the south hemisphere, so it was winter here. It was winter there while it was summer there. So that kind of sucks. But other than that, I mean, it was a pretty great experience. And as for how I've been doing personally, it feels so uncharacteristic of me to talk about it. And I really don't want to I don't want to feel like I'm dampening the mood this early on in the panel, but I've actually been going through a pretty rough time for quite a while. I don't really want to speak to any specifics, but just the ongoing struggles with my health, both physically and mentally, and trying to reconcile some of the damages that came not only from the medical transition, but also the social transition while I was a kid. It's something that I got too confident with myself. I thought that I was a little further in to healing than I really was. And for a while, I just wasn't taking very good care of myself. And while I was doing all this, I've been trying to take care of other people before myself. But I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about the things that I've been going through because I didn't want to admit to anybody that I was at a weak point in my life. I didn't want to feel like I was a burden. I didn't want to put that on anybody because I feel like I have this responsibility to just be strong for everybody, especially at the position that I'm in. But I realized that I can't function if I'm not doing that. And I mean, even just like the past few days for me have been very transformative. And I find that I think that like some of the happiest and most healing experiences for me have been the times that I've been around other detransitioners, other women and men who understand what it's like to go through this and to come back out and to try to find a community, to find other people who know what it's like. So I'm very grateful that everybody in the panel is here today and that all of you are here in the audience today. Thank you.
Yeah, as kind of a flip side from how you were kind of diving right into things, Chloe. I was, I just detransitioned like a year and a half ago, and there, at least for me, and maybe some of you guys have also kind of experienced this, where there's like this urge to just like speak out and be incredibly vocal and just like put yourself out there as much as you possibly can. And I got a taste of that at the beginning, and I was like, man, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that ride. So it's been really great to really just focus on family and like just figuring out myself really, and just like understanding what it means to be a man at like the point of where I'm at with everything I've been through. And I just did a panel last week, and that was the first panel I did, and now this is my second one, and it's been just really, really beautiful, and super, super grateful for everyone I've met, and the opportunities of just being able to meet the people that I've met, everyone here, and it's pretty remarkable, honestly, because this can be incredibly isolating to go through, and I did like a small video on YouTube when I first came out, and I had like literally hundreds of parents like emailing me, and that's really what initiated me to want to do a support group, because there's just so much broken and hurt families right now that just need a listening ear with love and compassion, and it's just wild on how much that's going on, so I really wanted to just put my focus into that, which has been really beautiful.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Of course.
In your support group, Kevin,
Yeah.
I knew you had parents, but for the kids, do you have kids who are still identifying as trans, or just detransitioners or desisters?
Are you like just specifically asking if there's minors there?
No,
or
in your group, are there? I know there's parents, but there's also a lot of detransitioners.
Yep.
And are there any who are still trans-identified?
there's been a couple that I've there'd be parents that would come, and then like they would have they would come for a few times, and then the idea of that would come up, and then they would come for like 1 or 2 sessions.
Yeah. It's just something that doesn't really exist right now.
Right.
So I think that's
Right.
really important, and I'm so glad you're doing that.
I think there's a lot of really amazing support groups out there, and I just saw super random idea of just bringing parents and detransitioners together, and I was like, well, let's just see what happens, and it's been it's been really great for that exact reason. I think there's actually I think someone within GenSpec is starting one that's specifically just for siblings.
Oh, yeah.
Which is beautiful.
There's been
which
a
is
sibling
amazing.
one. Yeah, there's been that sibling one.
I hopefully I didn't just drop the ball on that.
No,
too
no,
early.
it's been really good for some siblings. It
Yeah.
really has.
Other than that, it's been really amazing just to learn a new profession in being an electrician, and
New job?
constantly new jobs. That's all I got.
Okay.
All right, this is my first speaking engagement. Yeah. So thank you. And so I have to admit, it's a little bit difficult to kind of get over the nerves and the butterflies here. But I appreciate all of you for being here and supporting us. I've been through a pretty rough time. I spent about 2 decades convinced that I was in the wrong body. I came from a broken home and an abusive father and a neglectful mother who cared but could not be there for me in any emotional capacity. And because of that, I've never really known what an emotionally mature, healthy relationship looked like. And that has been with me for a long time. I've kind of been unable to know, I guess, what is normal. And so so much of my struggles I've really just interpreted as, you know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I just need to power through this. Maybe this is what it's like. And when you don't have a frame of reference, life can be really distorted. And so I've always sought inspiration through some of the characters that I grew up watching on TV, adopting their drive, their relentless pursuit for what they think is right, trying to adopt their strength to move forward, to make the world a better place. I've been chronically lonely, and so I've had a lot of friendships that were very negative, very draining, and quite oftentimes pretty abusive, because I didn't want to be alone. And I feel like for the first time in my life, I've really gotten a glimpse into myself, into what healthy relationships look like, and what actual support can be like. I've always been scientifically oriented and a first principles thinker, and so I've never been afraid to think outside the lines, but I have been afraid to speak out of turn in fears of being ostracized and being alone. And now that I have an idea of what life really should be like and the kind of people and support that you can get, I'm really I'm just starting on a mission to make sure that no one has to go through any of the kind of unnecessary suffering that I have been through. And one way that looks is to fight against, I want to be just like the public intellectuals that I look up to, the people who aren't afraid to speak the truth in face of consequences, people who aren't afraid to be authentic no matter what. And there's so many amazing people up here and in the audience right now who would just inspire me and light a fire underneath me. And I want to fight against any and all scientific dogma or anti-scientific dogma. I want to fight against parasitic ideologies that seek to divide us and spread throughout our society. And I want to make the world a better place. I want people to be fulfilled. I feel like a lot of us don't understand how disconnected from the kind of environment that we evolved to thrive in. I want to help people wake up and be fulfilled. And I'll be honest, I don't quite know exactly what that path will look like, but I know that it happens one step at a time.
Let's go.
Hell yeah, I'm very jazzed. I'm very jazzed.
You want to tell us about your book?
My book, of course I'm going to tell about the book. So I've been speaking out since 2019 and really ramping up more and more every year as just more people wake up and get involved and find their courage, and myself finding more and more courage. I'm also going through a rough time right now. I also just moved to Phoenix from the Midwest, independently of Nicolas, but it's very serendipitous. There's a, what are they called? Manifest Destiny, another revival, I guess, going on for the DETRANS. But so that's huge. I just moved away from everything that I've ever known at 27 years of loneliness, abuse, neglect, and so I am going through a lot of grief. There's been a lot of loss, and it's very serendipitous that I moved to Phoenix because I'm a massive believer in the Phoenix cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So I'm going through a major death right now. And I'm sure all of us know what that's like, and a rebirth as well, but not in a way of a false rebirth of an illusion like with transition, but a real rebirth where I'm finding real community, I'm finding my values, I'm moving away from unhealthy relationships, including with my own family and everything that I left behind. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And, what's getting me through is not only my faith in the Phoenix cycle and the ability to transcend our past experiences, and that we have to separate from the evil that has been thrust upon us, or that we were enmeshed with or grew up with or internalized or swallowed that poison, and understanding that we can day by day release that poison and find really nourishing, nurturing, healthy, moving, loving experiences with others and ourselves. What else is getting me through right now is I'm nearing the final processes of writing my memoir, and I've been a writer all my life, and it's been a childhood dream to officially publish a book. Now, I didn't think as a kid it'd be my childhood trauma, but whatever works. It's still getting there at the end. So, Surviving the Trans Myth is my book, and it's so powerful to be able to go back to the beginning and see this case study, because a lot of what we're told is, well, this is barely happening to anyone, so it doesn't matter. Or, these are just singular experiences, but these aren't singular experiences with detransition. These are very, very common. All of our stories are unique, but they're so similar to, hundreds, thousands of other people. I mean, everyone. It's very humanist, these struggles. Unfortunately, we specifically got funneled into a industry that promotes mutilation and disassociation. So that's my primary goal right now, is releasing my memoir, and that's going to be the focus of the next year, is finishing that and spreading it around and going on tour, and as much as I can, raising awareness that this is happening to a lot of families, a lot of kids, a lot of teens, young adults, older adults, and it's really a story of resilience and finding your values, finding what is healthy, what is normal, and really a return to solid American values of truth and freedom and liberty and love. So it's a story of healing from complex trauma, and it's interesting because I'm still writing about it in the past, but also I'm living it every day too. So it's not just that once you detransition, or, grief is, there's a good quote that, the grief doesn't grow smaller, you grow larger than your grief. And I'm going through a lot of grief right now, and having experiences like these and the ability to help other people is healing to me. And I'll be fully honest, I can't help my own family, my mother and father and siblings and other loved ones. I cannot help my past self. I cannot do anything to save them or help them or prevent anything. And that's so isolating and traumatizing. But what I can do is to reach other survivors like my dear friends here and other dear friends in the audience, and so many more people that are at a place in their spirit where they are ready, willing, and able to have courage and have truth and be available to grow. So it's an interesting dynamic to feel so helpless in what's happened to me as a child, and helpless what's happened in my family and other people that I've cared for. But then to meet all of these people and grow, just the depth of friendship is and just genuine the gratitude that I have for everyone here and everyone that's helped organize and just everyone that's involved in this is, it really makes me just have faith that there is good. And though I've experienced a lot of evil and I'm permanently scarred in my body deeply by evil, there's also good, and good is stronger than evil. So thank you for participating in good.
So Soren, I have one for you. I have a question for Soren. What do you say when people, sometimes it's journalists or sometimes it's trans activists, who will claim that you and groups like ours are questioning a trans person's right to exist?
So I honestly, just to start with, I think this whole framing that we're questioning anyone's right to exist, it's inherently distracting from what I assume, all, if not most of us, are here for today, which is the framework. We're here to challenge the framework, not whether or not these people deserve to live, and not just live, but live happy, healthy lives. Rather, in a way, and we had talked about this earlier, that in order to exist, you sort of have to be whole. And I think that when journalists and activists claim that it's the existence and not the framework that we're questioning, they're distracting from the fact that we really have a lot in common, that we want people to be happy. We just have different perspectives on what that actually looks like and what whole actually is. So I think everyone here today wants trans people to exist. We just don't want them to take a medical approach to it, a medical approach that is largely unscientific and experimental, and that you can't even conduct good research on because it's been ruled unethical. Clinical studies on testosterone in women have not made it anywhere because it is unethical to expose women to testosterone in levels higher than what our bodies are designed to manage. So I guess it's a great place to start for this discussion, is that we are not here because we hate trans people. We are not here because we wish that trans people would not exist. We are here because we think that there is a better path forward than drugs and plastic surgery. So.
And this one's for Airiel. So what advice do you have for people like you who are just starting to figure out the transition was a mistake? Medical transition, that is, or social.
Yeah. So one of the things that really sustained my identity, and so I had a cholecystoplasty back in 2012 or 13, and that's like an extra invasive version where they use part of your large intestine, where they cut into an entirely different healthy part of your system.
Yeah.
And about a year after that, this fantasy and honeymoon phase wore off. My desire, my deeply held belief that living and passing as the opposite sex was going to make me happier, was going to heal me, was going to be in line with who I thought that I was, it all just slowly melted away as all of these comorbidities of depression and anxiety, it melted away. And I was still left without knowing what healthy, emotionally mature relationships looked like. And you would think that after that, someone would wake up. But in addition to that belief, there was something else holding me back, and it ended up holding me back until about a year and a half ago. And that was that I spent most of my life disassociating from my own body, what my own body was telling me, from trying to really understand myself and my motivations. And it turns out that I had built an entire identity in the rejection of my own father and the way that he treated me and the way that he wanted me to be. And so what I would recommend for anyone even questioning is begin to look inward. Recognize if there's anything that you're running away from, what is really motivating these feelings and where do they come from? And that comes from looking inward and stillness and following the thread instead of trying to brute force instead of trying to ditch one framing and jump onto another, try to understand. Be okay with ambivalence. Be okay with not knowing. And listen.
That's great. Since there may be some parents in the audience today, I also want to ask the group some questions about just about things that might impact children. So, for example, I know how probably most of you will answer this one, but do you think, Nicolas, do you think gender identity is a fad?
Does that even need an answer?
I know. Or a social contagion, simply because so many people argue that everything's a social contagion. So
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I was part of it. I grew up in Japan and heavily bullied and made wrong for being feminine and gay. And I moved to the States around 13. And that's when I started having a phone, having YouTube, having Instagram. Social media was accessible with no supervision.
yeah.
So going on YouTube videos, looking up, I don't know, BuzzFeed videos, and I started seeing LGBT content, and more started to get recommended to me. It became a strong fixation because I was in a mindset of I want to escape. I want to escape my body. I don't feel safe in my body. I don't want to live reality. So what better than having a distraction that's on a digital screen that someone talks to me for hours at a time? So I would watch, it started with non-binary and gender fluid videos, and I was like, oh, maybe this is the answer to why there's something wrong with me. Maybe there is something wrong with me because I am a different gender. And that became an extreme fixation where the more I started watching more videos, the more it got recommended to me. So then transgender surgery videos got recommended to me.
As a
with,
child, yeah.
Yeah, this was like 14, 15. And I would be so obsessed with it. The trans influencers, they would, go through their surgery videos, recovery videos, and talk about their gender dysphoria, and that would create gender dysphoria in me because I would feel whatever they were feeling. And if they're like, oh my God, my brow bone is so big, I'd be like, I would go to the mirror and look at myself and be like, whoa, my brow bone is big. That's disgusting. So I already had so much body dysmorphia. So add more things that other people have, and I just started collecting body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria from all the trans influencers. Mm-hmm. So my whole life for 8 years was kind of dedicated to gender and watching influencers on YouTube for so many hours. And I spent so many hours in front of a mirror plucking my facial hair. I would, from the age of 7, push on my Adam's apple every single day because I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be a man. This is the worst thing ever. I would even create ways to sleep so that my Adam's apple wouldn't come out. So it would bend my neck like this and literally be like, please don't come out. And that was like a daily experience of I wake up, go to school. During breaks, I would just watch the trans influencers. It was like, it felt in that moment holy, which is the opposite of holy now that I look at it, because it felt like, wow, this is the light. This is the way I get out of my mental illness. This is the way that I can feel so much better because these trans influencers are so feeling liberated and excited and beautiful. I want to look beautiful, excited and free and be myself because I hate being myself. So if these people can be themselves by chopping up their body parts, why can't I? So yes, it is a social contagion.
Do you want to add something there, Soren?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing that. I think this is a really important question, and part of what I think is essential to know about it is that identity is an inherently social thing. When we're growing up, we learn who we are through through the role models we have to look up to. It's why kids play cops and robbers, right? So they learn what it's like to be mischievous and they learn what it's like to be brave. And so language, too, in this way is social. When you're exposed to these ideas through social media, through your peer groups, it is hard, if not impossible, to then begin to think of yourself in the context of what you've learned. I used a metaphor the other day that, like, we intellectualize everything in today's world. If you were to start taking a class on noses, right, and this is silly, but bear with me, you might not have an insecurity about your nose right now. But if you start to learn what a good nose looks like and what a weird nose looks like and how this nose has been pathologized because of the white people, like you might start to go home, like you said about the brow bones, and think, man, my nose has a ridge right here and it's wide. When I smile, it gets all flat. And like these things that you would have never thought about because it's just part of you. It is just one part of many. It's a beautifully diverse part in our species, right? But it is just one part. It's something you never would have thought about, and now you are because your peers are talking about it. We want to see how other people's experiences line up with our own, and sometimes that can come down in these really toxic ways where we're not just content with ourselves. We want to play cops and robbers, except it's not cops and robbers, which is something you can choose to do, right? You choose to be a cop, you choose to be robbers. It's about these things that you can't control, like brow bones or noses or sex. So, really important.
So you touched a little bit on how our perception of identity in the modern age has become very superficial, which is partly as a result because of how things like social media, for example, work. And I think things like the way that we groom ourselves, the way that we express ourselves, the name we're given, the way that we express ourselves through our clothing, those are all very minuscule parts of what our identity is. I think where our identity really shines through is one's character. The things that one does out of love for other people and to improve the world around them.
Absolutely. And Rory, I think, had something to add there, too.
So I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the social contagion aspect because my transition started really early, about 2005 or 4. And personally, my deep-seated gender dysphoria stemmed from abuse from my father and his rigid gender stereotypes. He was a meth addict who had a lot to prove to everybody he ran into. He would provoke people, he would antagonize them, he was very aggressive and very abrasive. From 3 months old, when I wouldn't stop crying, he would tell me to be a man. And I was forced to go live with him for a summer, and I developed the coping mechanism of dealing with his meth withdrawals and his abuse by freezing and internalizing. And he would tell me to be a man, and are you a little girl? Do you want to be a little girl? And I would internalize that until I told myself I wanted to be a girl, so maybe he wouldn't treat me like this. And so, around 13 years old, perhaps around 2004 or 5, when all of this distress came back, it's a hard time for young people, being aware of your social standing, going through puberty, all of this distress came back, and right with it, all of those coping mechanisms. And so when my gender dysphoria came back, and I eventually decided that I needed to do this extreme body modification to make myself feel better, I didn't know anybody that was trans. I eventually found people online who also suffered from immense gender dysphoria. And as I proceeded through the next 10 years of my life, jumping from friend group to friend group, unable to resolve issues within a group, because like I said, I didn't know what emotionally mature relationships looked like. I ended up going from friend group to friend group, and when things got bad, I just moved on. And so there were many, many different groups, one after another, where nobody had any idea what it meant to be trans. They had no frame of reference, no mental model. And very shortly after I explained my situation and that I was trans or born in the wrong body or had this certain framing, they were also like, Ari, I think that I'm trans too. And everyone wants to latch on to these simple ideas that help them make sense of all of their pain. And so I have seen the social contagion aspect firsthand, because unfortunately I've been kind of like a patient zero.
Yeah. You were. This is one maybe for Chloe. When parents say they want their kids to be happy, none of you guys are parents, but all of you are kids of someone. So what would be what advice would you give to parents of younger kids who might be dealing with some kind of gender confusion or dysphoria?
So I suppose I'll speak to my mom and dad's experience. They love me. And they absolutely wanted me to be happy through all of this. I was kind of a difficult child to raise from the very beginning. I almost died when I was born. They had to resuscitate me. And I had some learning and emotional delays that the doctors just really were not properly treating. I was later diagnosed at the age of 7 or 8 with ADHD and subsequently medicated at around 11 or 12. And I had a lot of struggles growing up, academically and socially especially. And that was a big part of why I latched onto this. And my mom and dad could see that. And they didn't really want to move forward with anything permanent at all. They wanted to allow me to just learn how to be in my own skin. They wanted to allow me to experiment with things like my hairstyles or the way that I carried myself or the way that I dressed myself, and allow me to dress more like my older brothers and the boys around me, but nothing beyond that. They never believed that I was their son. They never believed that I was transgender. They never believed in this from the very beginning. Yeah. They just wanted me to be happy. But the answer is not allowing your child to undergo these permanent procedures that will affect them for life. Because there is no reversibility. There is no going back from stopping and interfering with puberty. And they knew that, and they were sensible. And they had very sensible questions and pushed back against the doctors when they told them, when they tried to goad them into allowing me to undergo this at only 13. But what broke them was being told by these clinicians that it was my only choice. Yeah. They were threatened with suicide. They were threatened with their daughter's own suicide. It's the single biggest fear that any parent could ever have about their child, outliving them. No parent ever wants to go through that. But it's purely a myth. Children are not going to hurt themselves or commit suicide if they're just allowed to go through the natural course of how their body is supposed to develop. You have to teach their child that their identity does not come from these things. It does not come from the medication they take or the clothing that they wear, the name that they call themselves. It comes from the things that they do. It comes from their skills and the way that they apply it to the real world. You have to teach them that it's okay to go through this distress, especially around the time of puberty. These feelings of distress, no matter how deep around your body, are frankly quite normal. Yeah. And if anything, I think that distress is an important part of life, especially when it's regarding the self, because it propels you to improve, to become a better person. And as much as you should help your child during this time, and teach them these ideas and push back on it. You can't let it overtake your entire family life. You can't let it overtake your relationship with them. You can't be focusing on gender with them all the time. You have to be able to set aside most of your time with them to just being with them.
That's good.
And as hard as it can be to challenge these ideas that might be sprung upon you by social workers, by teachers, by school staff, even by the psychologists and doctors of your child, these other adults who are supposed to be helping your child thrive. You are the parent. You know your own child best. Do not let these adults ever get in the way between you and your child.
So any of y'all can answer this, and if you want to add to that, Chloe, what do you say when people say, well, children know who they are, believe them if they say they're transgender?
Well, that's exactly what they told my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And they scoffed at that, of course. Any sensible adult knows that no child knows who they are. I'm 20. And there are a lot of people who are in this room right now who are much older than I,
Right.
who probably still do not know themselves. What an expectation to place on a child.
Yeah.
It's been, I think, somewhere between 3 or 4 years now since I took my last testosterone shot. It's been a little bit longer since I last took the blockers. The effects of it are still very prevalent in my life today. Of course, with the surgery, I'm never going to be able to breastfeed. I'm never going to have breast again. It doesn't matter whether I get implants. It doesn't matter whether I get a reconstruction, because the function, the form, is never going to be there. I've lost a major part of myself as an aspiring mother and wife. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have children down the line. And it's something that has impacted my sexual function. I was 13 years old. I had never had a boyfriend or any relationship at the time that they started administering this treatment to me. I wasn't thinking about having kids. I wasn't thinking about an intimate or sex life because I had never experienced those things before. And at that age, I should not know. I should not understand that.
That's right.
No child is equipped to make decisions around the entire course of their psychological, physical, and sexual and reproductive development. None. This should never be an option for children.
Absolutely.
Ever.
And coming back to upon your question, then, what do you guys say to when people say, and Kevin, Airiel, anybody can answer this one, that, well, you shouldn't do this to kids, but it's okay if adults do it?
So, when I was in the middle of my master's, to be more specific with my addiction, I was smoking weed at the time. That wasn't the addiction, but there was someone I was doing that with that had crack there, and I got addicted to crack for 3 months while I was doing my master's, and the intention of going to British Columbia for my master's was, oh, well, you can get free surgery there. So I had a consultation when I first got to British Columbia for gender reassignment or vaginoplasty, whatever. And I decided I didn't want to do it, but it wasn't until in the middle of a wild stint of a crack addiction where I went to the doctor. I told him about the addiction, and he knew about it, and he still approved it and still scheduled it. So
And you were only like 22 at this time?
Correct. Yeah. So, and so if that's not a testament to itself, they aren't caring whether you're an adult or a child or an adult that is completely out of your mind, yeah.
So I don't think there's probably anyone in this room that would think that a child really knows who they are. But that can extend far beyond childhood into adulthood, especially when you spend so much time under heavy distortion and disassociation and not being in touch with reality, let alone yourself. I went through my surgery at 25, and I was so absolutely certain that this is what I needed to do. I had saved money for years. I knew I never wanted children. I knew that this was the absolute right thing for me. And you couldn't have convinced me otherwise, because it had been my entire world. It's like I was wearing blinders and I was singularly focused, like a kind of black and white rigid thinking that just had like a complete runaway effect. And it still took so long for me to come out of it. And only now do I realize that I might want children. And now I can't have them. I'm not even sure if, because I never took specifically puberty blockers, but I did take testosterone blockers and estrogen late 15, early 16 years old, back around 2005. And I was a late bloomer in terms of puberty. I could show you a picture of just 2 years ago, fully grown out facial hair. It looks like I have absolutely nothing. I look like my coworkers still, when I ask them to guess my age, they think 22, 24. I'm 35. Under the right distortion for long enough, I'm not sure if anyone could know who they are.
Yeah.
And so, even for a lot of adults, it's the wrong path. I'm not even sure exactly what it would look like for this to be the right decision.
Me either.
And expanding on that, it doesn't matter if, what age that the treatment's being administered, if the treatment is unscientific.
Yeah.
These treatments, they don't have a scientific basis. We don't have research. We don't have even systematic reviews in this country. They're just starting to do systematic reviews in pioneering countries, the UK, and they're concluding that there isn't a scientific basis for this. It is experimental. It's Mangala experimentation. And even the countries who started pioneering these treatments for adults and for children, the Netherlands, they're starting to hold back and say, wait a second, we're seeing regret and we're seeing poor outcomes of health. And, there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, I had a successful transition, but I had to get a hysterectomy because the atrophy of my genitals was so terrible. Yeah. Is that really successful when you're destroying a healthy body part? So in terms of consent, yes, there are some adults that are, more responsible or healthy or informed than others. But if the treatment itself isn't informed, if there's the top researchers in the World Professional Association for Transgender Health is the pioneering organization, Maya snickering, their special interest, debunking this. If that organization is as the top research organizers and activists, organizers, activists, that whole transition is just quotes. Trans, that's quotes, a trans person, sorry. But how can a normal everyday person consent, let alone gender dysphoria is a mental health condition. It doesn't mean that, you can't live a successful life living with a mental health condition, living with trauma. It doesn't mean that you can't make informed decisions, but the treatments themselves are not ethical. And they're certainly not being administered in an ethical way, as evidenced here. I was also suicidal the day that I had my breast cut off. I was 20, developmentally arrested from autism, and from developmental trauma. I have complex PTSD from child abuse. So I was not in a grounded or normal state of mind. I was on a psychedelic drug when I went to my follow-up appointment a month after the surgery. I was high. I wasn't rational in any way. And so so there's two elements here. One, the treatments just aren't ethical, so where is the informed consent for any adult of any age? But number two, the vast majority of people that are seeking these treatments are young adults, college age, 18 to 25, that are still developing their brains, still developing their relationships, that have been stunted from trauma of some kind, or have autism, which is a developmental condition. So there should be even more precaution around it. Not being able to be on crack and go to an appointment and be like, you want this or not? Okay. I believe you were saying, I don't know if you want to tell this, but it was very fascinating. Sorry, but it was very fascinating. No, we're bringing it up while we're dishing right now. But you stated that a provider told you, well, if you want to go through with this surgery, or if you don't, well, whatever, just show up or not show up. Is that correct? What, you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to finish, just what? Like, do you want this treatment or not? If you want, just this permanent surgery, that's a standard of care?
Yeah.
How can anyone consent to that when it's all a money grab? Yeah. If you had anything more to say, but.
Did you want to add, Kevin?
Speaking as somebody who transitioned medically and socially while I was still a child, I still have a great deal of sympathy for people who transitioned and have detransitioned during their adulthood. Because we all have the same issues from during, and even lasting into after our transitions. To be honest, I don't recall the last time I've ever spoken to a person transgender or detransitioned who had a healthy family growing up. Almost every person I've met who has transitioned at some point in their life has had one of two things. They either have had trauma stemming from a sexual assault, especially from early in their childhood, or relating to their family, having one or two parents out of the picture, having been through like a late stage adoption or moving through the foster care system, or simply being neglected or abused, or having a narcissistic parent. And, well, whether or not you're doing this to a child or an adult, for any doctor to do this to any human being is incredibly immoral and corrupt beyond belief.
Just to go back briefly to the question about kids knowing themselves, I think there's nuance to be had there, that like kids are little humans. Like, I don't think it's possible to know at any age that you're the opposite sex, because we only ever know what it's like to be our own sex, right? But when it comes to kids wanting to play with certain toys or wanting to wear certain items of clothing, that's not a fight that you should really be focusing on when kids are wanting to get sex changes, right? Like, that could end up pushing your kid further away from their biological sex when you are so adamant about your kid not knowing who they are, to the point that you're refusing to acknowledge that they do have certain interests and they do have thoughts and they do have opinions. And like, yeah, it's your responsibility as a parent to guide them and to shape them and to mold them, but they're going to be adults one day. They are going to be the age that you are, hopefully, right? One day. They are going to be sitting here being as complex as you are one day. And so I would hope, while we're holding space for kids to be stupid and for kids to have fleeting interests, to have, fleeting thoughts, just as we all do, right? You're not the same person you were pre-COVID, right? And it's only 2024.
Yeah.
that we still hold space for them to be independent, for them to be free, for them to have liberty, for them to have the prerogative to like the things they like and to dress the way that they want to dress. And I think if we prioritize that as human beings, we'd have a lot less issue with feeling this pushback, this need to completely rebel and control everything in our lives like we are seeing with some of these communities. These people are craving control for a reason. I think many of us are craving control for a reason because we spent the last, 4 years in pseudo lockdown, if not total lockdown. Like, we want freedom. We're Americans, right? And so that looks many different ways, but to tie that into the second question that I wanted to respond to, which was like, can this happen for adults? Like, maybe in a vacuum where there was no harm, but that's not the world we live in, right? And that's my concern is like kids, absolutely. It's a human right to be able to go through your natural puberty, a natural healthy puberty. And adults too, like no one has the ability to conceptualize what these harms are going to be like when you're actually experiencing them. Y'all saw my story today in the documentary screening. I didn't know what it was like to have hematomas until I was in the freaking hospital getting them drained. Like, you don't know what it's like to have this surgery, to lack a body part. People get body parts removed involuntarily due to things like cancer or even for just breast cancer running in their family. They might not even have it themselves. And we're over here pretending like it's some sort of luxury. And like you were saying, like there's not really a firmware solution to a software issue, right? Like, we have to be able to address these things at the root cause. And so that's where I came up with this, sort of idea of identity in kids. Like, encourage your kids to have a unique identity. And when you do that, they don't feel the need to seek it out in such permanent, dangerous ways in adulthood. So
I just want to add a little bit to what Airiel was saying with, being disassociated from such a young age, because that was my story. I was completely disassociated from such a young age, and to tell kids that they know who they are is a complete lie. I feel like when a kid says they're trans, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag that we should be looking and examining and really questioning and getting curious about. But instead, it's authentic. But our culture doesn't know what authentic even means anymore. We have lost our connection with our hearts, with our souls, because of consumerism, because of addiction, because of ignoring what our bodies are telling us. So we're taking Tylenol, we're taking pills, we're taking all these things to suppress and numb ourselves. So if the adults don't know who they are, how can the kids ever know who they are? Kids are meant to explore. I'm still finally exploring who I am. I'm exploring that femininity can look like 70% feminine, 30% masculine. And I'm 24 and I'm still just learning that. So a kid that just came into their body and realizing, oh, I get to explore as a boy, being told, wait, maybe I want to be a girl, that's completely bull crap. Because no kid could ever know that at all. As I remember as a kid, the purest memory I had of just being free was I just leaned over and tried to kiss this boy. 'Cause I was like, oh my God, he's so cute. And I was just so free with it. And I feel like those glimpses of complete freedom is who we are meant to explore, not chopping off body parts, not being an opposite gender, because there's no such thing in my book to be the opposite gender, because we're human. We were designed to be in these bodies. We were divinely like Mother Earth divinely created these bodies cell by cell within our mother's wombs. So in a way, we're just respecting her, our mothers, our grandmothers, our ancestors, the moment we say we're the different gender.
I do want to get to the question of porn before, because I think that's important. Do you have something to say quickly? Or?
Yeah, just like that a trans identity is fundamentally a rejection of self and reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I wondered if a couple of y'all maybe would weigh in on this, because a lot of people don't understand that. What do you? Oh, and any questions? We want to make sure you guys write down questions that you have too, and we have index cards to pass out. So raise your hand if you have a question. But one thing I wanted to note, and that a lot every detransitioner I've ever spoken with has talked about how pornography, even porn that looks kind of innocent, like anime porn, has influenced them. So, and many parents may not even know that their children have access to it, but little children now have access to porn. Even if they're not looking for it, it comes to find them. And I'd like to have you guys maybe say something about that too.
So I know it's different for males and females. I'll speak on the female experience. Males and females have a different relationship to sexuality. It's just part of the reproductive burden that females have, and it goes down to evolutionary biology. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is real, and it's part of the disassociation to consume pornography to consume any pornography. It's not a real embodied experience. It's a fantasy. Me personally, I was so dissociated. I wanted to be a gay man. I wanted to have sex with men and be loved by men, but as a man. That was the fantasy. That was the fantasy because I was abused by my father and abused by others in my life, and I was quirky and autistic, and it's difficult. No, basically, no one wants to be an abused girl or boy. I didn't want to be an abused girl. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be loved by the people I was attracted to, that I was loved. I'm a very loving person. And I was watching since I was 12, 13, 14. And I would watch gay male porn because in my mind, these are the people that I love. I had a very severe relational trauma from abuse from my father and neglect from my mother. And I would watch gay male porn, seeking it out. This is very female typical. I would seeking out gay male lovemaking porn, so romantic, right? So male. And no one taught me any of this. I had to learn years later that, it sounds so simple, but I never got the chance to grow up normally. I was abused. My perception of reality was based in evil. I didn't know what it was like to be loved or treated well by a man. I internalized that I was worthless sexually, emotionally, fundamentally. And I would watch this gay male porn, crying often, pretty much every time I would watch it because I never would have that body. I never would be loved in that way. And it's very disassociative because all those times that I was touching myself, I was touching a female body. And it's been very empowering for me to just accept that very fundamental thing that all of the sexual pleasure and romantic pleasure and sensitivity and every single experience that I've had in 27 years of my life is in a female body. So it's very disturbing to be dissociated and fantasizing about being loved as a male using a female body, right? A female heart. That sounds a little esoteric, female heart, but this is a female-specific experience. And so porn absolutely rotted my brain along with, many other things. But this is not an exclusive experience. And it's not just men that are watching porn. I know it's taboo to say, but a lot of women watch porn, or they read, or they're seeing GIFs, or they're seeing anime or cartoons. For me, I was watching just visceral, graphic abuse porn. And a lot more kids are doing that. It used to be something, maybe it was mostly men were, finding a Hustler magazine or something, and they were hiding it under their mattress or whatever. And it wasn't as common for women, or at least it wasn't as spoken about. But because of our desensitization through digital media, it's incredibly common for women to be watching really violent porn and to think that that is all that is out there for them in terms of finding love, in terms of having pleasure. And it's an extremely disturbing experience.
As far as, I had 3 different sexual experiences before middle school, and that really resulted in mad confusion stemming from that. And so that ultimately led me to, try to figure it out. And, starting puberty with that as a foundation was a recipe for just, a addiction, of course. And that's that really didn't help with any of my gender confusion moving forward. So and quick notes, footnote, I kind of just dropped the crack addiction earlier. I did, after 3 months, I did quit. I went cold turkey, and I've been sober for eight years now. So, yeah.
First of all, I think that porn is evil beyond words, and the pornography industry should be obliterated. But I had a very early childhood exposure to it. I grew up in a very hypersexual environment from very early on in my school years, actually. I believe my first exposure to any kind of porn was, I think, just like looking through Google Images as a kid, like looking through just like pictures and fan art of like my favorite cartoon character, right? And then finding this one image of one of my favorite characters with like her top falling off or something. I remember just being so shocked at the sight of this, like, why would anybody ever do this? Who would do this to Sailor Moon? Like, why would you do that? It shook my whole core. But I think like my first exposure to like actual porn was on like a school laptop being shown to me by one of my peers. And even before that, like the things that I would hear from my very precocious peers, especially the boys, the things that they would say about girls and women and their bodies and like the parts that they would like ogle at, their fantasies, was a little bit terrifying. And I started going through puberty a little bit early. I was about 8 or 9 years old when my breasts started to develop visibly. So with that came a lot of uncomfortable attention that I didn't really know how to feel about or deal with. And the combination of having such unfettered and early access to pornography and just growing up in a very sexual culture really just distorted my view of, first, what it means to be a girl or a woman and the worth that women had. I didn't have a whole lot of close female role models growing up. So I was largely going off of the things that I would hear from like my female peers or the things I would read online or the things that like my male friends would say about women. And it felt like a lot of my worth was just going to come from my looks and my body and my sexuality, and that I might not be anything more than that. I wanted to escape the early sexualization and feeling like that was all that my worth as a human being came down to. And as Laura said, a lot of girls are being exposed to very pornography. A lot of girls have these feelings of being scared of their looks being the only important part of themselves, but also that their bodies are just vessels for abuse by men. And I think that as women, we need to do better for the younger women and girls in our lives. We need to talk to them about these ideas, about the development of their bodies, of how to avoid situations where they can be taken advantage of sexually by men, what to look for in their male partners, and to avoid things like pornography and promiscuity.
Yeah.
And where their worth really comes from.
I feel like the porn takes away the sacredness of sex. It really, porn does kill love. I feel like there's a reason why we're drawn to things that we're drawn to. Especially for me, I drawn to things that made me feel like there was something wrong with me, that I'm unworthy. So of course, hyperfixating and getting addicted to gay porn from age 12. And for a decade, it was a constant addiction. And it fueled this fantasy of wanting to be with a straight man, because I felt so unlovable as a feminine man, let alone a feminine gay man. So it felt more comfortable for me when I was playing myself to imagine myself as a woman and having these men that I'm watching porn, kind of fantasizing that they would be me as if I had a female vagina. So that was a constant fantasy for years and years and years, and going through male puberty, walking through high school, the hallways and seeing cute boys, and immediately having that mindset, you objectify everybody, especially if you're a man. So the fact that I was obsessing over boys all day long in class, I had a hard time focusing in class sometimes because it was so hyperfixated on, oh my God, what would it look like to have this boy look at me? What would it look like to have this boy play me, kiss me, hold me, love me? And that there was no concept of true love, to be seen, to be taken care of, to be held in a gentle, delicate way. My body needed delicacy, but I gave it roughness through sleeping with men that didn't deserve the love that I was capable, that I deserved. And I think through porn, it ruins our perception of what we're worthy of, what we deserve. And I'm still learning through reading romance novels of, oh my God, love can be soft, love can be fancy and cute and nice. So it's been healing to hear and receive something that is so completely different from porn, because porn disconnects from our body. I had to end my porn addiction through really connecting with my body when I would pleasure myself and just deep breathe and feel what the would feel like in my body. And the moment I realized that, I was like, wow, that feels so much more exciting, more fun and enlivening compared to staring at my phone and not really even realizing that I'm touching myself and getting more excited over a visual. It was like, it's not worth it to lose my humanity over porn.
And I know we're running out of time, so I'll try and keep this brief. But I think it's important too, when we think about in the context of the sexual revolution, that when you guys, a lot of you guys, when you guys were growing up, it was not in your pocket on your phone. It was a magazine you found in your dad, your mom's closet that had these static images that you knew were posed and photographed and fake, right? Today, that's not how it is at all. And when you combine that with the saturation of the market, the fact that it's not just Playboy putting it out, it is people putting actual real life videos online, you realize that this thing has bled over into everyday society, onto your Instagram feeds, into the photos of Kim K and her BBL that your little girls and little boys are picking up on. And that's what's scary, is that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, men and women looked all different sorts of way. It was almost like we had overcome the gender roles. You had David Bowie, and my mom has photos of her when she was 15 wearing a freaking beanie and a huge sweater and like posing all like tomboyish, right? And then you look at today and it's like, how do we get back to hyperfemininity and hypermasculinity? And like, yeah, our society is broken and hurting, but it's also porn. Like, frankly, it is porn. The way that we have come to view man and woman as these sexual, hypersexual ideals, it's affecting all of us. And I say that as someone who my first porn exposure was at 9 years old, because I wanted to role play, which we talked about earlier. Role play is so natural for kids. I wanted to role play and I didn't have enough healthy outlets for that. So I sought out adults whose version of role play was not my 9-year-old innocent version of role play. So just keep that in mind. Porn is a real issue, and it really does tie into this whole transgender phenomenon we're seeing. It really does.
Yeah, big time. Okay, we have lots of questions, so I want to get to them a lot. Let's see. Okay, the first one. Clinicians, counselors, all associated with transgender surgeries, have they been examined for past trauma and abuse? You mean for the clinicians themselves? How is their mental health and emotional? I think that you probably answered your own question there. Because these people, these people clearly are sick and twisted people that would want to do this to anyone.
Well, and I venture to say too, in the case of me and the nurse practitioner who prescribed my testosterone, his child, who is older than me, so not quite a child, but you get what I mean by that, his own child was transgender. So for him, I don't always think that he was just sick and twisted and evil and was trying to get off to transitioning kids. I think for him, he had this bias. He had this terror as a parent where he saw his own kids suffering and he wanted to, through this distorted way, alleviate the suffering of other kids. But what you have to realize is there is such a thing as conflict of interest. And if you can't separate yourself out from that trauma, which it is traumatic being a parent of a gender confused child, then maybe you shouldn't be dealing in that subject matter. You want to help, but really you're hurting. You don't know how to decipher between what this person in front of you needs, what they need help with, and what enabling for them might look like. Helping and enabling are freaking sisters, man, but they're not twins.
So currently, there's no medical or mental health services for detransitioners, and insurance companies don't cover basic health issues for detransitioners. That's all true. What services do you need and would like to have access to if we could get it to you?
A time machine.
Time machine? Yeah.
I think what I've been moving towards is, yes, there are very specific medical, social, psychological issues that come from living this lie and being involved in activism and obviously the physical changes. But what I'd like to see is just very wise clinicians that deal in general practice, trauma-informed clinicians. There's so many different modalities of therapy and healing and shamans and priests and all sorts of people who help others. What I would like to see is awareness of detransition in the general population, because ultimately what we most need is just trauma-informed care. This is complex grief. This is complex trauma. This is attachment issues. This is family issues. This is addiction. Yes, there are specific medical issues, and so what I would like to see is, if you or anyone, that you can speak to about this truthfully, and I very encourage you to speak truthfully to everyone, but we need everyday people who already have established practices, who are, informed and caring and compassionate, who want to help others, to be aware of detransitioners so that detransitioners don't need to keep being stuck in this fixation around gender only. Yes, I've gone to 2 different amazing therapists who really have saved my life, who specifically are also obsessed with gender, and that's been great because we can share a fixation. But maybe we shouldn't encourage only fixations on gender. We shouldn't keep encouraging only fixations on trans and activism and all of this trauma and pain, because we need to address the core issues. So what I really see as someone who's been detransitioned since 2019 and has seen the rapid changes of it, I would like to see more, life coaches, more trauma-informed, family practices, marriage counselors, whatever it is, being aware that this is an issue and opening up their practice to detransitioners as well. We don't necessarily need detrans-only care or support. We need existential support, because these are human beings and these are humanistic issues.
So for me, it's a combination of life coaching and mentorship is what got me through a majority of my detransition. And therapy never worked. I had a therapist that was a Satanist. I had a bunch of therapists that just weren't working for me. And I just finally met this lady online and we connected, and she really walked me through how to truly witness all the parts of ourselves that are screaming to be seen, because each and every one of us has this wounded aspects within us that just are crying and just want to be held and be seen. And it's no difference with detransitioners. And detransitioners have never received love, have never really been seen. I mean, they're in the trans cult where they're just gaslighting each other and being horrible and mean. If you even question do I want to detransition, they just bully you back into thinking you're trans. So that's not love. And I feel like therapy has its place, and I'm happy that it works for people that it does. But for me, I had to find an unconventional way. Even having sort of a retreat center just for disassociated people or detransitioners, that we go out in a cabin and spend time in nature away from our phones and really connect to what it is to be human, come back to our bodies, learn to dance, learn to release what we're feeling, because there's so much that our cells and our bodies are doing for us that we kind of need to release. We need a space where each and every person that's a detransitioner can just honestly scream at the mountains and just get it all out, because it's just been so stored in us. So having some sort of thing that's unconventional, that's not really led by a therapist, that's kind of what I would recommend, just because I think today's society, we just need something different. We just need a different direction. That's what I would propose.
So somebody was asking what legal actions have been implemented with both civil and criminal. So now in about 25 states, gender transition of minors is illegal. So in some states, yeah. Thanks in large part to a lot of these guys who have gone to legislative hearings and testified around the country. And in some of those states, the legal age is 19, I think New Hampshire and Nebraska. So they're safe till 19. The bad thing is nobody has done anything about it for anybody who isn't a minor. And to be able to file lawsuits, we have to have statutes of limitations in the states extended, because Soren barely got her lawsuit in Texas, and Laura couldn't get hers, and Kevin is too late, Airiel is too late. So there's no way for most detransitioners, by the time they realize what happened to them and that it was wrong and fraudulent, it's too late. Because the state statute of limitations for medical malpractice is always like 2 years, 3 years, something like that. And it takes a little while to figure all this stuff out. So what we're trying to do at Partners for Ethical Care and Transition Justice, and a lot of other organizations are helping us to try to convince state legislatures to extend the statutes of limitations. It's a really hard sell, because everybody wants to help the minors, but once they're 18, people say they can do what they want. And as you've heard here, the idea that somehow at 18, autism goes away, trauma goes away, schizophrenia goes away. It doesn't. So we need to just change the laws to allow for like a 20-year statute of limitations for all these, and I can promise you, they would start packing up and going someplace else if they had a statute of limitations that was long, because they know. Scott Nugent wanted to take action, but it was 5 years after her transition, as you saw in the video. Nobody would touch the case because she was 42 when it happened, but she was mentally ill still. So she had no help, and she has millions of dollars and can never get her body back. So that's really what we need. And Chloe, did you want to add something to that too?
Yes, so far in these 26 states that have passed measures to protect children, it has all been about the medical transitioning of children. And unfortunately, logistically speaking, it's going to be very difficult to near impossible to also protect adults in these laws. I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed through the healthcare systems and hospitals in each states, primarily through gatekeeping and better filtering of patients. But we unfortunately cannot stop every adult from being harmed by this. That being said, I do believe that we should absolutely increase the statute of limitations, because I'm one of the lucky cases.
Yeah.
I detransitioned while I was still a child, before I was 18, and I had a law firm reach out to me while I was still 17. My story was just barely starting to blow up. Not everybody gets that opportunity. Many of these people are also people who transitioned as children. And to do it as a child, it can make you trapped going into adulthood, not knowing for years what it's like to even have been your birth sex. So to come back out of that in adulthood, it often comes later. And far after the legal statute of limitations for these people, and even for adults. These are adults who are often developmentally stunted for unrelated reasons or are traumatized, and they need to be given more grace.
Yeah.
And we need to find justice for both the adults and the children who've been affected by this, not only through legislation and other measures, but also through challenging them legally. I believe that right now there are about 21 lawsuits in some stage that are being pursued by detransitioners right now to hold the doctors and adults who did this to them accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that might even be more powerful than the legislation that is being passed, because
it'll make more difference.
it's holding them accountable. It's putting pressure not only on these doctors, but also on any doctors who are even thinking about doing this to any patient.
That's right. Here's a good one, and I don't know how many more we have time for. Looking back, is there something someone could have said that would have impacted you so that you would have questioned your decision?
It would have been, no,
Yeah.
you can't. You're a kid. And you know who should have said that? It should have been the doctors.
Yeah.
It should not have been an option.
Exactly. And the rest of y'all probably want to add to this because this is a common question.
Yeah. I think something important that should have been talked about more that probably would have helped me is this idea of sex constancy. This is a term that was coined by the researcher Lawrence Kohlberg. And the idea is that it's a developmental process that kids go through to know that sex is something that is constant and doesn't change with changes in appearance. So when a small child is shown a Ken doll, for example, I'm talking like 2, 3, 4 years old. When the Ken doll is naked, the child will go, that's a boy. But when you dress the Ken doll up in a tutu, you can show them the same exact doll. And because of the developmental process they're in, they will tell you it's a girl. Because at that age, going back to the role-playing thing, right, they are still learning what is cultural and what is physical. And if we would have had a better understanding of that, a better understanding of how children develop and what these things mean to them, because they are not thinking about these concepts like you and I are. They are not adults. I said earlier, they are little people, but they are not adults. That would have been helpful. That would have been concrete. That would have been real. And that would have done a great job balancing where I was and where I needed to be.
I feel like mine isn't more of like what to say or instead what to do. From a young age, I'm going to say this again, disassociated. So from age 7, I'm already out of my body. I feel like what I needed more of was emotional stability from my mom to, just be held, to feel like I'm in my body, that I'm safe to be in here and be told and held and be rocked, to be like, hey, it's okay to feel. It's okay that you're feeling this. It sucks that the bullies were just so awful to you. It sucks that this is happening to you. But hey, you're okay, you're safe, you're loved as you are. That sort of emotional safety was never given to me. Sure, my parents were like, hey, what are you thinking right now? What are you feeling? But I would always say nothing, just because I'd never felt safe to explore and express how I was feeling to anybody. So just through that physical touch, because especially I'm out of my body, and being held that way would have been so much more comforting than anything anybody could have said, because I am a stubborn person. When my mind goes towards something, I just do it. And I don't think once I was past 10, 13, nobody could have told me specifically, hey, don't do this, just be yourself. I would not have listened, because what I needed was to be shown what love is. And I was looking for it in all the wrong places.
A good first one would have been like maybe quick before you do anything, but
But did you talk to your parents about it?
They no, no, and they didn't even know I did the surgery either, because
Oh my God.
because I was so messed up at that point. Like the intention of doing surgery was like basically a suicide attempt. I was hoping like I wouldn't
You wouldn't make it through?
I wouldn't make it through, you know. But you know, as well, one of the bigger issues I had moving through this was, you know, with the sexual abuse and everything. There was how I moved through that was I was so ashamed of who I was through that because, you know, there's massive confusion that happens through that, right? And so I was so ashamed of who I was through that because, you know, there's like, oh, well, you know, I'm obviously like you know, I'm the whole reason why that happened, you know? And so when you start feeling like that, you start becoming ashamed of yourself. And I didn't want to become the, you know, the perpetrators that, you know, where that happened to me. And so that became a reflection of, well, a good way to do that is to get rid of any sort of shred of masculinity within me. And it would have been really great to be able to have someone that could recognize that I had that when I was like going through therapy to get the letter of recommendation for hormones. That was a pretty big miss.
Yeah.
And so that would have been ideal. Yeah.
And it seems like it kind of comes down to there's so, and we have support groups of like 4,000 parents now who are going through this. So
Yeah.
we see it all the time where the parents will do anything. And it's true that a lot of kids who go through this had a stressful or traumatic family life, but we also have a lot of kids who have very loving parents and who didn't have that kind of trauma as children. They might have had a different trauma, like a death in the family or something. There's usually something that kind of sets it off. But there's a lot of really wonderful families who love their children, and they would do anything to try to stop this. And there is nothing they can do. I mean, you can try to reason with the child until you're blue in the face. So what we really need is the people who do the cutting. The people who are the predators are the ones who need to step up. And the predator. That's the thing. The predators are the caretakers. It is the fox guarding the hen house. So that's what we hear from almost every detransitioner is my parents tried, or there's nothing my parents could have said. You know, and it's tragic because the parents know what's going to happen. Parents know their kids are going to come out of it most of the time. Right. And yet their hands are tied because the kid can walk down the street at age 18, start getting on hormones, and then a couple weeks later, literally get surgery.
Yeah, you know, parents are not given the toolkit to emotionally even address this with kids. So,
No.
you know, at least for me, and I think maybe some others too, where it really just ended up in a screaming match, and it wasn't an actual real conversation, and there, you know, and it's, you know, and that's a really big thing. I do my best on helping people understand of, you know, even though this is like very activating for you, let's try to figure out how we can have a real conversation about it instead of just, you know, blowing up and, you know, ultimately just cracking up the family unit.
Yeah, and you have a lot of experience with that yourself, so you're probably the best one to tell us if there's anything a parent can do.
I mean, just, you know, looking at your communications toolkit and asking yourself, what can I do better? How can I do better? What does better look like? And, you know, it's not like there's not like a pedestal of what it looks like as far as like the ultimate best. It's really just ultimately of like, how can I communicate with the intention of love, and how can I really communicate in a way that this person's gonna literally feel that they're safe to share anything with me.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's not easy, and that's where, practice and, constant communication is really key, where we can kind of strengthen, and sharpen that toolkit, because, it's so important to focus on keeping the family unit together. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you can have more influence when you're close to your child, and that's really what we tell our parents most of the time, is there's no magic words, but staying close to your child is critical, because if you're there, you may have some influence on the child when the wheels start to turn a little more, and if you have no relationship, you don't have a chance to influence what they do. So. Someone else asked, what's your advice to parents and community members regarding preventing this path for children when clinicians, social workers, teachers, even church leaders are pushing children into gender-affirming care, even with the threat of removing children from their home by CPS if the parents don't agree to gender-affirming care? And yes, we see this all the time. We know lots of families who have lost their kids due to, especially in the Pacific Northwest, California, it happens. And it's terrible, because the best advice is you got to get a lawyer if you can. Not everybody can afford one. Always contact us at PEC, because sometimes we may know somebody in your area. But it's very, very difficult. Try not to let your child be alone with adults who might have bad intentions, and that's so hard when it's somebody at school. And talk to your kids. I would say talk to your kids about this early on, so that they never start thinking that this is a possibility. Most parents never suspected something like this would befall their kids, because it's mostly due to social media or friend groups, and you don't know what they're looking at necessarily. So keep your kids off the internet as long as you possibly can. That becomes hard in high school when they need it for school, So, but it's very difficult, and we have had people who had to leave the state. Several people left Washington, Oregon, California, moved to Texas, Florida, other states where the CPS will not take your child away for this reason. So it's drastic, but that's the only thing you could do. Somebody asked about what happened to the tomboys. Why are girls who are just tomboyish, who are interested in cars, have different interests, or interested in girls as a romantic partner? Why doesn't anybody talk about how homophobic this movement is? And actually, a lot of people have talked about it. But go ahead.
Well, there's two different parts to that. There's the homophobia part. And then there's the just gender nonconforming part. And if we kind of look at, the small amount of data that we have, and from kind of anecdotal, most of the people that are transitioning today are actually heterosexual. They're doing it for trauma reasons, autism reasons, social contagion, or sexual reasons. There are definitely still some homosexuals. But most of them are heterosexual, and they're gender nonconforming. So number one, I would say we are pathologizing just normal identity formation, as Soren was saying. There needs to be role playing. There's an identity stage in Erik Erikson's theory of social development, which is identity versus role confusion. And, well, that could be the name of this panel. So there is the built-in time of pubertal development, and a little before and a little after, where it's healthy and normal and natural to try on different clothes, to try on different roles, to try different jobs. That's where we're studying so many different topics in school. We're trying to gauge, what piques the child's natural gifts or weaknesses, where can they learn and develop. That's normal. But what we're having is activists. It's political, and it's actually spiritual. And there's an overlap. There's a transhumanist movement of activists that have spiritual beliefs that are coming in with a lot of money from the top, filtered through WPATH and other organizations and the state, that are claiming that it is claiming anti-humanist beliefs where, you know, we can combine human beings into different, you know, forms of humans. There doesn't need to be male or female. We can have artificial wombs. That's what's coming down the pipeline. I know there's been enough in the pipe already, but that's also coming down. And so this is the type of stuff that I worry about often, as I've already been through this now. I worry, what is the next phase of this? Because it comes back to the money that can be made. And yeah, most of these surgeons probably really don't care. They probably don't hold deeply spiritual beliefs about, you know, humanism, but there are enough that do, that are facilitating this through the activist organizations like WPATH that do hold these spiritual beliefs. It is a new form of religion to modify your body. It's spiritual elective body modification to transcend the self, which if you think about it in an existential sense, is transcending death. We transition and we kill the old self so that we can live a better life, that we can live longer. Ironically, though, these procedures are shortening people's lifespans. So that's why it's not a rational belief. It's spiritual. Now I'm forgetting what the question was, to come back to a thesis point here.
About the homophobia and tomboys.
Yeah, the tomboys. Back off to the transhumanist stuff. But yeah, I think that's what it is we're pathologizing normal identity formation. And especially there's a lot of autistic or neurodivergent kids. Mm-hmm. And if you think about trauma, you know, you want to hide from yourself. I never felt comfortable with my breasts. I developed at age 9. I'm autistic. I have sensory issues.
Sensory
very
issues are big, yeah.
sensitive, as well as I was a tomboy. I was insecure. I didn't think any boys would have crushes on me. You know, I obviously grew out of that. It took a lot of work, but I grew out of that, and I'm fine with being a female and having sexual attention, like most of us will. But I didn't realize that I was running away from my body, from sexuality, even though I was watching a lot of porn. It's dissociation, another theme of this panel. Mm-hmm. Dissociation is our middle name. But so tomboys, you know, a lot of times someone just is a tomboy naturally. They gravitate towards certain clothes that are more comfortable, like an autistic kid. Sometimes, though, it really is trauma. And that's a red flag, especially with rapid onset cases. Like if you have a kid that was previously comfortable with, you know, expression and being embodied and running around and being active, and they become very reclusive and very online, yes, that's part of normal teenage development to individuate, but some of it might be a red flag that there's something going on socially or mentally with that child, that they don't feel comfortable with their bodies because of some type of abuse. And that can be very subtle psychologically. I can't really speak on homophobia personally, so I don't know if anyone wants to. I am. I'm gesturing casually to the, yes.
Yeah, I play baseball, so.
Well, and that's why you have organizations such as Gays Against Groomers or LGBT Alliance, where they're made up of gay people who are saying, you know, this whole movement is homophobic because you're telling same-sex attracted people that they can't be like that anymore. They have to change their sex now. It's of course it's homophobic. It's conversion therapy, exactly. So yeah, that's a huge theme throughout this whole movement.
But not all of us are gay.
No, not everybody. Yeah, it is. Laura's right that it used to, years ago, it happened more to effeminate boys. They would get transitioned. And still in Iran and Brazil and a lot of countries, they do that to little boys who seem effeminate. But now, I would say here in the U.S., it is probably more heterosexual kids now, but still enough gay kids too. It's just wrong anyway, wherever you do it, however you do it. Yeah. Soren?
Well, and that's a topic that I feel like we need to start talking about more, that when we sort of push these stereotypes, not just of what men and women are like, but what heterosexuals and homosexuals are like, you're going to end up with people who are gender nonconforming but not gay, who feel like they aren't worthy of attention from the opposite sex, or who feel like something is wrong with them but they can't pinpoint it within these traditional frameworks. So if you have a little girl who wants to have short hair, I mean, before I even was trans, right, I wanted to have short hair because I played softball and it was in my face and I wanted to donate it to breast cancer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had all these other reasons, but you know, kids at school called me a dyke. They thought I was going to be a lesbian. And, you know, I mean, I do love women, right? I've only really ever dated women, but part of me has this deep, profound question that perhaps that's a role that I grew into because I couldn't just be a tomboy for the rest of my life. I write about this in my op-ed for the Dallas Morning News, but like tomboys are always expected to either grow out of it or be the butt of the joke forever. You know, we never get the prince. We never get that happily ever after. And then when we do, like, you know, we've all seen Mulan, right? You know, she gets to be this big, powerful, like, you know, like gender nonconforming lady, but then she's like beautiful and perfect and pretty at the end. And there are women like that. Women like that deserve to see themselves in media too, right? But like for me, I'm playing baseball now with 30, 40-year-old boys. I mean, men, whatever you want to call them. They're the boys to me. And I've never felt happier. I'm able to be rough and tumble. I used to get kicked out of girls' leagues because I was too intense. And it's like, no, I just needed to find my crowd. And it is okay to be an effeminate man or a masculine woman. That is part of the diversity of human beings. You know, it is part of who we are. And that is part of the beauty of personality is, yeah, men and women evolved to be a certain way generally, right? But when we sort of break out of those molds, which we all do, I mean, some of y'all are all dressed up today, but I know you wear freaking oversized t-shirts and basketball shorts at home. Let's be real, you know? It's just better for us to kind of like ditch the labels when we can and appreciate ourselves for being heterodox.
I feel like part of it is the erasure of authenticity. I mean, I feel like wasn't able to express, you know, my feminine self growing up just because it was I was called the gay slur in Japanese all my life, and that was just like, okay, I guess I can't be this person. So it was almost like you were saying earlier, is like the butt of the joke. Like even my family members were saying it all my life, like, oh, you're okama, like every single day. So I was like, okay, well, clearly not supposed to be this. This isn't allowed. So obviously this movement is like, oh, let's erase this part. Let's clear this part. It's almost like this sort of collective parasite that sucks out the authenticity so that it can become some sort of evil thing that transcends within us and kills the part of us that wants to deeply be ourselves. And I feel like today we're showing up as ourselves. We finally said, none of that. We're saying no to the parasites that try to suck out our authenticity. But we're here today alive, resilient, and strong.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd like to add too, we're showing up as ourselves at 7,000 feet elevation. That's crazy, y'all. So what is that? I'm from 400 feet elevation, just so you know.
Airiel has something to say before we disband.
There is no such thing as a trans child. This concept was created to affirm the trans adult.
Yeah.
This came out of a niche experiment in the Netherlands called the Dutch Protocol, where you had a bunch of adults who had transitioned and were not happy with their own transition because of the secondary sex characteristics of their natal sex. And so they're like, hey, maybe if we stopped puberty, these kids would pass better. And this idea was just adopted wholesale to the West into our institutions that have been ideologically captured. And the idea of gender identity and a lot of these woke ideologies are essentially have abandoned the null hypothesis. At the very core of science, the idea of trying to disprove your ideas, and only when you throw everything at it and it still stands, then can you use it as a model of prediction.
Yeah.
I've actually spoken to a few school boards in the past, and my biggest message to any school board that is encouraging this to students within the school and keeping it a secret from their parents is that you have no right to get in between a child and their parents. No matter how strongly, how affectionately you feel about that child, you will never know and understand and love them as much as their mother and father do.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say one last sentence, and that is, I was going to talk about you guys, and then I was like, wait a minute, they can do a lot better than I can as far as explaining who they are and how amazing. But we, Partners for Ethical Care, is so privileged to work with these people, and you'll just never meet anybody more interesting, more intelligent, more talented, and more fun to work with than these detransitioners. And I do have to plug Transition Justice is our legal project to find lawyers for detransitioners. And we also, Camille Kiefel, another detransitioner, has an organization called Detrans Help. And they're trying to find, to do research for not only on to help detransitioners, but to help people before they transition. So she's got a great organization too. So just want to throw that out there. Thank you guys so much for coming.